Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. I am hoping that you are with me for Kemetic Ascension. Ankh and Ma'at. I'm so pleased that you are here. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Kemetic Ascension for August 24th, 2025. We're coming fast upon the end of the summer period. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Ankh and Ma'at, Sister Benetta, how are you? Ankh and Ma'at, it is so wonderful that you're there. Ankh and Ma'at, come on in, come on in. I am hoping that you are all entering. I want to welcome you. I know that there's so many other things that you could be doing with your Sunday. I want to greet you all. I want to say dua to you for joining us. It is so important that you are here with us. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. Glad that you are here. Come on in, come on in. Getting set here. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. Wonderful. Let me go ahead and greet you all. I think that you all know that as we begin, need an active email from you, sir. Ankh and Ma'at. The best email to reach me at is probably for this, the Shrine email. But if you tried to reach me there, I'll give you both emails. This is the most frequently. It's simply jabariosaze@hotmail.com. I use that for all sorts of things. That's a good email. But you could also use the Shrine email, which is Jed, D-J-E-D, at shrineofma'at.org. Both of those are good. But I'd say that if you need a faster response, perhaps the Hotmail account might get you one. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. I think so many of you are aware of how we begin Kemetic Ascension. We ask for you to simply come forward and tell us where in the world you are, where on the back of Geb you are, and also how long you've been partaking in Kemetic Ascension. Where in the world you are and how long you've been part of Kemetic Ascension. Ankh and Ma'at, I've already said Ankh and Ma'at to Sister Benetta Sutton, who was the first person here. Ankh and Ma'at to Solomon Jr. 803. Ankh and Ma'at to Gnostic Boo, the Thing King. Ankh and Ma'at to Shane the Watcher 616, who is always here with us. All of you, all of the names I've mentioned are folks that we always see. Ankh and Ma'at to Anthony Jones. Ankh and Ma'at to Naima Ra. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at to all of you who have decided to spend a part of your Sunday with us. Ankh and Ma'at to Sanet Shenka, who was here as Olivia B. McGraw. Her government name. Ankh and Ma'at to you, one of our full members, one of our very active members. Ankh and Ma'at to Sen Curtis, another one of our full and active members, here as Adamayam 720. Ankh and Ma'at, Ankh and Ma'at. Glad that you are here from Painesville, Ohio, I think is where you are right now. Ankh and Ma'at. Snet Shenkai, you're going to YouTube too. Ankh and Ma'at. It'd be great to have some of the Full Shrine members on YouTube and some on Facebook, just in case there are folks who are asking questions. When we begin Kemetic Ascension, I sometimes don't see all of the answers. And certainly some of you who are full members and answer many of the questions. Ankin Ma'at to Sanet Yashiriya Sakina Ra. Sanet Sakina Ra is another active full member. Ankin Ma'at coming to us from North. I always forget where you are. North Dakota, right? Is that where you are? Is that where you are, Sakina Ra? It is so difficult for me to put some of the places in my head that I have never been to. I need to come out there and see what it's like. Ankin Ma'at to Ron Green, Ankin Ma'at, who's coming to us from Alton, Illinois. And yes, Painesville, Ohio. Yes, yes, yes. Ankin Ma'at to Coffee Cakes. That's a great, great name. And I see Naima Raz in Urbana, Champaign, Illinois. And there is Shen Ka, who is there. Who you might have also seen as Olivia McGraw, who is also here. That's her shrine, her Kemetic name, and she's there as a full member of the shrine. Ankama to Jehuti Imin Jed Kara, who is one of our full members. Still in St. Louis, in the Lou. Ankan Ma'at to you. Ankan Ma'at to Hero Asar Ank Amun Ra, who is here from Dallas, Texas. Ankan Ma'at to you. Ankan Ma'at to Amin, I think that's Amin Ra. I like how you spelled your name. Ankan Ma'at. Anthony Jones says he's going on 5 years. Been some time, right? Anjai Bryant, who has been with us for a long time. Ankan Ma'at, coming to us, I believe you're in New Jersey near Philly. I am planning to do a tour of the Penn Museum again. Haven't been there in some time. I'm looking forward to doing that again. I think that's the last time I saw you. Ankan Ma'at to you. I hope you are doing well. Ankan Ma'at to Tassetti, who is who's been here for about 4 years in Denver, Colorado. Ankan Ma'at, Ankan Ma'at, Ankan Ma'at to Eric Adams, who has been here for a few months, coming to us in North Carolina, has the same name as the mayor of New York City. That is not the mayor of New York City. He's in North Carolina. Ankin Ma'at. I see Solomon Jr. 803 is coming to us from Columbia, South Carolina. Wonderful, wonderful. Black 5464. Ankin Ma'at, you said you celebrated Sankofa Square in Toronto, a grand opening. I would love to know more about that. What is that like? Is there actually a monument there? Were there lots of people there? Do you have video? Do you have pictures? I would love to see what that is like there in Toronto. I don't think I've ever been to Toronto, although I spent some time in Ontario. Ankan Ma'at. Ankan Ma'at to William Humphrey, who is, as you know, a full active member, the Jati of Phoenix, that we also call Bennu. Did you know that Phoenix, the very concept of the Phoenix, that bird that grows old and then bursts into flames, and in the ashes you see this new bird come forth? That is a Kemetic concept. It comes from ancient Kemet, and its name was the Bennu, and that's the reason why you might hear me refer to Phoenix as Bennu. Ankan Ma'at to the Jati of Phoenix, our organizer in Phoenix. Ankan Ma'at to you, send William Humphrey. Ankan Ma'at to Kemezi. Peace, peace to you too. Grand Forks, North Dakota. I was almost going to say Forks, North Dakota. Sinet Shakina Ra. Grand Forks, North Dakota. Ankan Ma'at to you. Ankan Ma'at to Sinet Rhonda in Texas, who has been with us for 3 years. Ankan Ma'at to send Jason Holmes from Lincoln, Nebraska, from East St. Louis in Lincoln, Nebraska, one of our very active and full members. Been with you so long, I don't remember exactly. He is an active member. You know, there are some folks that have been very active for a long time, kind of the bedrock of the shrine. You'll hear me mention them. They're always here. And Sen Jason Holmes is one of them as well. I hope you're doing well, Sen Jason. I have been ensconced in history more than usual. And I know that Sen Jason is another person who is probably just as interested in the history of our people as I am. And I've spent the last few weeks really just in history, reading, studying, going to sites. I have learned more about our history in the last month than I had in the month before, or maybe even the year before, just by being in sites and experiencing our history. And today, you've seen we're going to talk a bit about ancestor veneration, about the process of focusing on the ancestors. It is such a critical topic right now. Perhaps there are few times in our history as Africans in the United States, and I know that some of you are in other places, but most of us are in the United States. It is perhaps a more challenging time to focus on these topics than it has been in such a long time, because we have an administration who has emboldened people to simply say that our history does not matter, and they are trying to erase our history. It is difficult. It is such a difficult time when you hear just rampant ignorance, people saying things that are absolutely ludicrous, who are trying to do the unthinkable instead of just not mentioning his enslavement. They are now challenging whether enslavement was a bad thing. Is it as bad as people say? Shouldn't we measure it by the standards of the day? Those are the kinds of things that we're beginning to continue to see, and we have a lot of work to do. So I spent a lot of time really thinking about and focusing on it. And Shane, the watcher, has seen said, have you seen all the changes the Trump administration is making to the Smithsonian? I want to say to you that it pains me greatly that after really, I'd say over 100 years of people of African descent fighting to create a museum in the national capital, Washington D.C., to celebrate the history of African people, not just the focusing on the history of enslavement, by the way. That space it tries to tell a comprehensive story, all the way from enslavement to the current day. And I'm going to say that historians like myself were critical of the fact to some degree that perhaps we didn't think that they focused enough on our African origins. But honestly, that was in some ways a gratuitous critique. The museum was beautiful, and I took a tour there last year. I'm scheduling another tour there this fall, and we see that the Trump administration is attacking those spaces. And we see that in many states, it has become virtually illegal to talk about our history. We have a lot to do. We have a lot to do. I can't even say that that we've seen a time. I know in my 50 plus years, I don't think I've seen a time when our history has been under attack as much. We've never truly, because this nation has never embraced the history of African people in the United States, we've never truly had a fulsome understanding of our history. We are working on that, right? So many of us, whether we are formally trained or not formally trained, have focused on studying our history, and that has been powerful. I think there are more people of African descent who are focused on history than in any other community. So, as much as we can say we don't know our history and we need to learn our history, the reality is you don't see people who are not formally trained, people who might not even have high school diplomas, focused on history in almost any other community other than in the United States. You see Black folk of varying levels of education just reading history, ensconced in history. So, in our community, our history has been important, and now it is under attack. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. I see Sanet Chenka saying, come on back. We are on our way. We're going to be back there. And the only reason why I haven't announced a date for going to Washington, D.C. yet is because I really don't want I really want to do a multi-day trip, to be very honest. Sanet Shenka has been saying it. Sen Gavin, two of our full members in the DMV area, have been saying there's so much to see. How are you going to come on a bus for a few hours and then go back on the bus? They are right. There's so much to do. But the cost of coming from here to there for many people who are coming from the New York area would be difficult. So we have a lot to do. So I'm trying to see how I can make this a multi-day trip. Maybe we come down really early Saturday, spend the night there in a hotel, and then go and then do some more things on Sunday morning, and then head back to New York. So that's really what we'd like to do. And so that's what we're gonna really work to do. I'm working on it right now. So hopefully we'll be doing that really soon. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. Don Olfa Minton said, I said Trump was a bad choice for president. Honestly, without getting too political here, honestly, I don't even know why I'm saying that, because the reality is I think that the proof has been in the last 7-8 months. We've seen some things that have been really disturbing, particularly, let's just talk about history for a second, particularly with regard to trying to erase our history. You don't hear nothing from Judge Joe Brown. No, Judge Joe Brown has crawled back into whatever hole he came out from. Someone that I really respected before I was aware of his positions. A fraternity brother. We're fraternity brothers. When I first met him, I greeted him warmly. We did our Alpha Phi Alpha grip, and we're hugging, and we were talking and laughing, and all of a sudden he said something strange, and I said, whoop. You know how someone can say something and they go left real quick? So I said, okay. And we just kept talking and laughing. Then he said something else, and I was like, whoa. I was like, what? By the time he said the third thing, I said, now, Judge Joe, you know you're wrong. And warmly, I tried to say, this is why I think you're wrong. You know, he threatened to fight me. He wanted to fight. Someone had to hold him back. And to Sonnetter's credit, he has that on video. Because at one point, I got really angry and we were yelling at each other. Sonnetter has it on video. He said to me, brother, it's not going to look good. I'm not going to release it. That was years ago. He's not going to release it. With all the critiques y'all have of Sonnetter, you should know that is, there's some things about him that you just don't know when you're dealing with him on a personal level. And he just never released that. It would have gotten clicks. He would have made some money on a little video of us arguing. And he just decided that was not appropriate. So we have a lot to do, family. We have a lot to do. And I am gearing up not to. I see Tasha King saying, I was wondering when you're going to take trips to Africa. I missed the past few trips. I have not traveled to Africa in over a year. And for me, I'm itching. So you should know I am planning trips that are going to be all over the United States. I'm planning trips to the continent, lots of trips to the continent. And I'm also in the midst of planning trips to other areas, to Brazil and other things like that. So in about a month, you're going to hear a whole slate. I'm hoping that you all will come. So let me just say to you, with that large and long preamble, that I have been thinking about our history. I've been thinking about our ancestors, perhaps excessively. And I thought that I had something else planned to talk about today, but I'm going to tell you one of the things that I did late at night is I drove to a space that had an old Black cemetery here in Queens, New York. I'm currently in Queens in my family's home. I had done that all in Harlem forever, and I still go to the spaces in Harlem near the house. But as I've been here in Queens, I went to that space and just meditated and prayed. And then I came back home and I was preparing what I was going to talk about today. And I said, this is what's on your heart. So I changed everything at the last minute and said, we must talk about how we celebrate our ancestors. In the Kemetic tradition, The focus on our ancestors is primary to our spiritual tradition. Primary. Primary. In fact, some people got it so twisted, they started saying the ancient Egyptians worshiped the dead. That is not an accurate way of describing it. But what you should understand is ancestral veneration in ancient Kemet. In fact, ancestral veneration in all of the African traditions is so key. It is a fundamental part of African spirituality. And so today I want to talk a bit about that. I'm not going to focus extensively on the erasure of our history, simply because this could easily be 4 hours, and we don't need to do 4 hours today. But I definitely want to talk about some of. Oh, and by the way, I see Tasha King is mentioning Mexico. Do you know we're actually even planning a Black Mexico tour? Yasira Hotep and I are planning a Black Mexico tour, because a lot of times when we think about the Latin world, we don't think about the role that Africans played in it, which is absolutely crazy. So we're even planning a Black Mexico tour. You're going to hear about that too. And so I have really been thinking about how to allow our ancestors to speak once again. And so today I'd like to talk to you about ancestor veneration. I'm going to make a very basic altar to my ancestors. And in doing that, I'm hoping that I'm going to spur you to speak to not just those ancestors whose names you know, but also the ancestors whose names are unknown. I'm truly hoping that you will be motivated to do that, because our ancestors will deserve to be venerated, deserve to be remembered, deserve to be fed. And as we feed our ancestors, they continue to live. I believe no other community requires the intervention of the ancestors more than people of African descent. It is our ancestors who struggled to create this nation, and I want us to truly think about how important this is. Would you be visiting any ancient Mexican sites? Yes, we will be. Yes, we will be. By the way, I should say we have 2 members of the Wenwet here. We have, I can see here, Hemnetter Jamar is here. Ankan Ma'at to you, Jamar. Hope all is well. We also have, she's been clear that she wants to be known as Abut and not Hemet Netter, and that is fine. Self-determination is critically important. Whether you call her Abut or Hemet Netter, you should know that she is one of the priestesses of the Shrine of Ma'at, and that I'm speaking to. She's here as Shrine of Sekhmet. I'm talking about Abut Sashat. I'm hoping that you are well too. I haven't seen either of you in some time, and I was talking to 2 members of the Wenwet who said that we should be scheduling dinner, not for any work at all, just to spend some time and eat some food and laugh with each other. So you're going to be getting an announcement from me with some dates, an email from me with some dates that could possibly work. I'm going to give you at least 3 or 4 weeks, because I know they were all really busy, for us to just sit down and enjoy each other, because it's been a long time since we've done that. And so that is in the offing. Trust me, Hemnetter Ames has been on my back saying, when you gonna send out the email? So it's coming really soon. You should expect it in a day or two that we'll be trying to do that as well, just so we can sit down and eat. And I know that for those of you who are a little bit further away, like Abu Ka, who was in Philly, and obviously Abut Sekhmet is Abut Seshat Abutsashat is in Connecticut most of the time. So I know she's a little bit further away too. So we're gonna try to give you some time so you all can come in and eat some food. Okay, so we'll be in communication with that as well. Ankh to the rest of you who have come in. I see Sen Clee Ford, who is one of our full members. Ankh and Ma'at to Nathaniel, Leroy, Turner. Ankh to all of you who have come in and I missed. Let's begin the way we must begin. Let us begin with the with the let's see, with the opening of the way. And you know that I am going to place in the chat the link. I'm wondering if anyone would like to come in and do the opening for our gathering. I would love for someone to come in, a full member of the shrine, to lead us in the opening of the way, in the manner that our shrine elder, Baba Heru Ankara Samad Sepata, instructed us to begin anything of importance. And as we always say, you should do it at least once a day, at the beginning of your day at least, because that is when you are about to need to put on your spiritual armor. That is when you're going to need to ask the ancestors and the Neteru for spiritual clarity as you go through your day. So certainly we suggest that you do the opening of the way at least at the beginning of your day so you can go into the rest of your day in peace and power. And so that is the opening. Is there someone that wants to come in and do the opening? Of course, you know, I can always lead you in the opening, but it's helpful sometimes to see some other faces. So if someone wants to come in, it would be great. You know very well that as we do our gathering, as we do the opening of the way, we actually are asking that you'll join us. We're asking that we're not going to do this as if you were watching Netflix. This is not a time to Netflix and chill. This is a time for you to stand and do this ceremony because it is one of the tools that I believe you will benefit from if you keep it in your toolbox. And so I'm asking that you stand. Please stand. And we're going to tell you that it is best for you to stand in what we call the pose of adoration. This is a position that you will see our ancestors in on temple walls and on papyri for an extended period of time. In fact, you're seeing a version of the pose of adoration here. Right there, you're seeing a portion, a modified version of the pose of adoration. So as you do this, you're going to stand upright and you're going to stand as if you are taking a stride forward, a short stride forward with your left foot. Of course, you should recognize in the Kemetic tradition, the left side of your body is the one that gives, and the right side of your body is that which receives. That is in the sort of physical philosophy of ancient Kemet. And so you should know that that is what we do. So as you do this, standing with your legs, left in front of right, you can't see my left foot right now, you're going to then take your hands and expose your palms in front of you. And you're going to make sure that the left portion of your left hand is a bit further forward and your right hand is a bit further back. In some ways, it mirrors the same way that you are standing. And in doing that, you can also have your right hand a bit further down. Now, don't break your wrist extensively. We never see anyone standing like this. If you're going to break them at all, break them slightly. Or you can even keep them completely straight as you stand in this position. I see a question. What does it mean when they put the ankh toward the mouth? Most times you're going to see the ankh going towards the nose. And that is the concept that you are taking in the divine breath of life, which allows you to live. Let's keep it simple. This is how we draw breath. And so that is usually what it is. Although I will say to you, in certain ceremonies, they would also have put the ankh towards the mouth and to other portions of the body, as they were attempting to allow someone who had become an ancestor to revivify, to once again draw breath and draw life in the afterlife, and allow them to return into the physical realm and return into the position of the afterlife. So that is what you're going to see. So as you stand in this position, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take a deep breath from here, not from here. We learn to breathe this way when we are actually dealing with anxiety. If you look at a baby, you're going to see they're breathing all from here. As we get older, we begin to breathe more from here. These deep belly breaths, these pot belly breaths, are cleansing, and they allow this oxygenated blood to move more efficiently, more effectively through your being. So we're going to take a deep breath, and then we're going to chant the word of life, Ankh. Let's begin. Anetrak in Bedhet. Nuke in Bedhet. Anetrak Hapi. Nuke Hapi. Twau Inter. Turn to the right. Anetrak Serket. Nuke Serket. Anetrak Kebsenuf. Nuke Kebsenuf. Twau Inter. Make your 90-degree turn once more. Anetrak Ast. Nuke Ast. Anetrak Amset. Nuke Amset. Twau Inter. Anetrak Neat. Nuke Neat. Anetrak Dwa Mutef. Nuke Dwa Mutef. Twau Inter. Anetrak Newt. Nuke Newt. Anetrak Geb. Nuke Geb. Twau Inter. Anetrak Shoe. Shoe. Turn to your right. Shoe. Turn to your right. Shoe. Turn to your right. Shoe. Turn again to the front. Nuke Shoe. Anetrak Tefnut. Tefnut. Now you're going to turn to your left. Tefnut. 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 Nuke Tefnut. Twau Inter. Anetrak Paut in Teru. Nuke and boot. Nuke Paut in Teru. Anetrak and Boo in Teru. Nuke in Boo in Teru. Twau Inter. Twau Inter. Dwa, 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 dwa for being with us as we do the opening of the way. I hope that you all joined us in doing it and you weren't simply standing there or watching us. This particular ceremony, ritual, is something that was created, or I always say put into its current configuration by our shrine elder, Baba Heru Ankh Ra Samad Sepata. It is that ceremony that seeks to remind you of how divine you are, how infinite you are, how powerful you are, how wise you are, how capable you are. All of this will allow you to approach your day in the manner that you should. And I'm hoping that you will do this just as our ancestors expected us to. Now, that ceremony that you just saw, the opening of the way, was put into its configuration by our shrine elder, but all of its elements would be immediately recognizable to the ancients. And so I truly hope that you join us in it. So, and I see that so many of you, including Ayana Mead, Ankin Ma'at Ayana Mead, did it as well. That is wonderful. Did you ever see time to look at the email I sent you with the questions about the MetaNetter? I was looking for that email. I believe you're the one that we chatted briefly on a post that I put up on Facebook, and I didn't see your email. Perhaps it went to my folder. Can you put to my spam folder? Could you put your email? Put your email in the chat. I hope that doesn't mean that you're going to get spammed, but put your email in the chat so I know what to look for, because I did not see your email. But I think I did. You're probably the person that I communicated with on Facebook. So please put your email in the chat. Make sure, once again, that you're sending it. I suggested that you send it to the email that I use most frequently, which is jabariosaze@hotmail.com. And there's also my shrine email, which is jed@shrineofma'at.org. And so you can do that as well. Okay. And Ankin Ma'at, I see that Sen Garrick Van, one of our full members coming to us from Arizona, is here. Ankin Ma'at to you, dear Sen Garrick. It's good to know that you're out there. I hope your queen is doing well as well. And we see Society Commentare, who is here as well. Ankin Ma'at, who are usually here every week, every Kemetic Ascension, every 2 weeks as well. Ankin Ma'at to you. Absolutely. We also see Asar Mkai, Asar Mka, Ankin Ma'at. You should know Asar Mka is one of those amazing, amazing priests who is extremely knowledgeable. Whenever we spend time together, it's always been online, but whenever we're together, I am always empowered by the things that he said, and really also in awe of his study as well. And it's always important to have people around you that are also doing the work. It helps buoy you and helps keep you on track when you know that there are others that are doing the work as well. So you'll be in New York. So listen, when you come into New York, you need to let me know, right? So we can spend some time, because I have never been with you in person, and that has to change. I'm looking forward to it when you come. Please let me know when you're coming so that we can chop it up. Okay, because I haven't, and I'm trying to remember where in the United States you are as well. And I know that I asked Sonetta, and I know I asked you, and I know you answered. I do not remember. But whenever I'm in your city, I need to come and see you as well. That is a really, really knowledgeable brother that has been in the tradition for Colorado. Yeah. See, I haven't been all the way to Colorado yet. So I really do need to spend some time there as well. Okay. Some other questions. I'm sorry, really quick. I see some other questions I should try to answer, or comments I should try to answer. First of all, let me say Ankin Ma'at to, I see Benny. I love that name, Benny. I love it. Benny. Purification before the ritual might have given it more power. Yes, there's no disagreement with that. I suggest, and we've talked about purification in other Kemetic Ascension sessions, you should purify before Kemetic Ascension. So we'll continue to talk about that. Yes, purification before ritual is essential. And certainly my purification before coming to you as the Hebnetter and Tepi for Kemetic Ascension is more involved than a regular shower before I go out to have the day. I usually do more during that before Kemetic Ascension, and we'll talk more about that as well. Yes, absolutely correct. Let's see. And Gambino Green Thumb says he sent it on August 18th. It's been a while. Okay, I'm going to look for it again. Did you put the email in the chat? Put your email in the chat, please, just so I know what I'm looking for. Okay, because then I can search for, because your name here is different than the name that it was on Facebook. Tell me your email so I'm able to search for it as well. Ankin Ma'at to Larry Henderson. Larry Henderson, Ankin Ma'at, one of our full members. How are you? How are you? I need to catch up with you and your queen and see how you're doing. Ankin Ma'at, it's good to see you there. How can you be notified of travel events? Please send me an email and let me know that you want to be notified of travel events, and I'll make sure that you get it. I see Sen Curtis is saying, why do we no longer make a 90-degree turn after Shu and Tefnut? Actually, it is also modeled in a diagram in our files on the website. The way that I think you're saying after we do, we don't do a 90-degree turn after Shu and Tefnut. We don't do a 90-degree turn when we come from Nut and Geb, and then we go into Shu and Tefnut. I think that's what you're saying. And that's all. They exist on a different level than the others that we mentioned. And so, and then when you do Shu and Tefnut, you do the 90-degree turn for both of them. Remember, Shu is 90 degree and we turn right, and then Tefnut is 90 degrees, 4 turns. I guess that's 3 turns because you're already facing front, but in the 4 directions, and you're turning left. So you do turns for Shu and Tefnut. You just don't make a turn between Nut and Geb and then Shu and Tefnut. You're doing, because it's really because you're going to do those turns as you spend the divine energy of Shu and the divine energy of Tefnut, and that's the way that it works. I'm not sure if it's, I don't think it's modeled in the diagram in your files. I'd love to see it. I don't, because it's always been the way that I've described it, that you saw me do it. And so you don't usually make a turn in between those two. Would you do a lesson on the 42 assessors of Ma'at and how you say prayers to each assessor? I have to say to you that I have never done a prayer to all 42. I usually look at the assessors that I am pleading for mercy, for grace from. I usually pray to them. And it has to do with what I've done during that day or not done during that day. But I have never done a prayer to each assessor at one time. I have done prayers to maybe as many as 10, difficult day, 10. So we'll talk more about that. We will. Can you shoot me an email to remind? I don't think we've ever done a Kemetic Ascension on that topic, and that would be an interesting one. Sinet Shia, Ari Keperin Amen. Please send me an email on that so I remember, because I think that would be an interesting thing for us to talk about as practitioners. How's it going on your road to your PhD? It has been rocky. It has been rocky. I was working on a master's degree in the UK, and the university did something horribly racist. They decided to fire the professor that was leading our study. It was a master's degree in the history of Africa and the African diaspora. It was a wonderful program, and they simply closed it. So we're now actually in court with them. I'm probably going to bypass that and go directly once again. It would have been my 3rd master's degree, by the way. And I was all but dissertation in that. They call the master's degree paper in the UK a dissertation and not a thesis. It's a reverse here in the United States. Someone's going to hear me say that and say, Jabari wasn't writing a dissertation, he was writing a thesis. In the UK, it's the reverse. Anyway, if you know, you know. But definitely, I'm probably going to be applying once again to PhD programs this fall, so that I can go directly into a PhD program in New York. Ankin Ma'at to Rashad Muhammad. Ankin Ma'at to Jahim Ray. Ankin Ma'at to you. I don't think I've seen you recently. If I have, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for not recognizing it. Ankh and Ma'at to you. Haven't seen you in a while. One of our full members. So Sophia Duglin, Ankh and Ma'at. Are you actually Rich Duglin? Or related to Rich Duglin? Because definitely that would mean you're one of our full members. I use the Wabu ritual as taught by the Art of Prayer in Rasanku Keper at the Temple of Anu. Wonderful. That prayer is wonderful as well. That is good. And then with Shun Tefnut, we turn 360 degrees. Yes, I'm probably behind on the comments. Ankh and Ma'at and Dwa to Abutsa Shot. Ankh and Ma'at to Baby Bubba. Larry Henderson says he's doing great. Ankh and Ma'at, please give your queen a gigantic hug for me. I always wondered, Tasha King says, I always wondered when they show the sun drop the Ankh on someone with kids and the pyramid wall, does the sun represent, what does the sun represent with the Ankh? I think what you're referring to is images of Akhenaten, who was saying that the entire Kemetic community should focus on the Aten Ra. And so he argued, there's no one that would disagree with him on this particular issue. He argued that it was the Aten, the power, the divine power of the sun that gave us all life. And so that is what you are seeing, the work of Akhenaten. Ursa Ma'at, Ankin Ma'at to you. It is good to see you. Ursa Ma'at, I haven't seen you in a long time. Ankin Ma'at. Tuti Ma'at, Rasirius B. Ankin Ma'at, one of our full members. Ankin Ma'at to you from Galveston, Texas. I didn't know there were 42 assessors of Ma'at, only 42 assessors of Asar. I think that we're talking about the same thing, by the way. And essentially, sometimes they're called 42 assessors of Ma'at, sometimes 42 assessors of Asar. We should talk more about what we're referring to when it comes to Asar and Ma'at. And maybe in a presentation, I would clarify that as well. Sophia Duglin, that's your wife. You're on her computer. Yes, Ankh and Ma'at to you, said Rich. Ankh and Ma'at to James Limba. Ankh and Ma'at to, yes, a lesson on Ma'a would be great as well. Ma'a is the male counterpart to Ma'at. Someplace around here, I have a statue to Ma'a. I found a statue to Ma'a. And we were supposed to be leaving. Here I am in Kemet, and we're leaving. And I'm telling everybody to get on the bus, and I see that statue. And now I'm interrupting everybody because I'm trying to get the statue. You should know that Ma'a is obviously one of those Neteru that you rarely see. You'll see Ma'at all the time, but you will rarely see Ma'a, who is her male counterpart. And so there's a statue of him here that I'll probably show you at some point as well. Let's see. Hero Tuti Pata Umika Temra just woke up. Yeah, because you're on the West Coast, so you know that there are several hours behind us. Ankh and Ma'at to one of our full members, Ankh and Ma'at, not the Grand Minister, but the Master Grand Prime Minister. Jabari, is that our conversation from last night? Ankh and Ma'at. Ankh and Ma'at to Tuti Ma'at, Series B, you live in Caddy, Texas. Like to talk to you about okay, you all should get together. Zep Tepi Slim, wonderful name. There needs to be another conversation with you and Brother Tehuti. I'm interested in doing that. I'm interested in doing that, definitely. I sent the diagram to your email. Okay, I'll take a look at it. If it's a diagram I sent you, I have it already, but we should talk about it. Can we get a full lesson on Ma'a? It would be hard to do a full lesson on Ma'a because he is not spoken about very much. But I could certainly talk more about Ma'a. I thought he was interesting that there was a Ma'a, so we could talk about where we see a Ma'a, perhaps why we see Ma'a. I could do that, definitely. I took a world history class, and most professors believe ancient Egypt had multiple gods that were real. Were the gods a representation of something else? I don't believe that most professors would argue that. They will say that Kemet had multiple deities. And I think that that is, I wouldn't describe it that way, but they're trying to say that in descriptions of the divine, our Kemetic ancestors actually describe, use different voices, use different names to describe the divine. That's what they're saying when they say that they use multiple gods. I honestly believe that in some ways, what we're talking about is a particular concentration of divine energy that exists in the divine energy of the all. So I would not necessarily call it multiple gods, but I do understand what they're saying when they say it. As a practitioner, I would describe it a little bit differently. But I don't think that most professors would argue that they were real. And I want to say this very critically. I've said it a few different times. It is important for us to recognize that real does not necessarily mean literal. Okay? And literal does not necessarily mean real. Sometimes when we say real, you're saying the gods are real. Yes, they are real, but they're not literal. And I know that that can be confusing because in the Abrahamic traditions, the practitioners have rendered all of their divine forces, all of their characters as literal historical people, even though there is absolutely no evidence that most of the people that we read about were actually people that lived. Many of the places that they describe are places that either did not exist or did not exist in the manner that they described in the book. You should understand that we are talking about great myth in most instances when we talk about spirituality, including in Kemet. But just because something is not literal, does not mean it is not real. This is a conversation that might actually be mind bending, and there's no way I'm going to give this particular issue its proper due. But I'll just say this and then I'll leave it there because it's a topic that we've talked about in Kemetic Ascension at great length before. Recognize that whenever anyone made their transition into becoming an ancestor, they became a Sar. In fact, their name was listed at it. If I was going to become an ancestor, when I become an ancestor, if I was going to have an illustrated or written copy of the Reyu Pertem Hiruan Ger, that book that has been misnomered, the Book of the Dead, I would also have my name listed as Jabari Asar. I would become Asar. If everyone is Asar, then how can we say Asar is a literal being? Is Asar real? Yes, very real. But is Asar literal? I don't think that's what we're talking about here. And so I want us to understand the difference. This is a mind-bending concept, but there are many things that are extremely important that are not literal. Think about freedom. How many of our ancestors died for freedom? Has anyone tasted freedom? Has anyone smelled freedom? Has anyone actually said, "You see that thing in the corner? Yeah, what is that?" That's freedom. No. Freedom is an idea and a concept, a state of being. Very, very real. Many of our ancestors, I would argue millions of our ancestors, have died for freedom over the millennia. Millions. At least hundreds of thousands. But is it real? So that is why we have to begin to make these distinctions. Um, yeah, there's so many questions. I'm trying to answer them all, and it's not really. I'm not probably not doing a good job of it. Robert Brunag says, which Egyptian Neteru? I wouldn't use the word God, but I understand what you're asking. Would you recommend to pray for relationships and health problems? I would first say, first of all, Ankh and Ma'at, you're here every Kemetic Ascension. Let me say that use the names that work for you. But if I were going to do that, for health problems, I would call on Sekhmet. I might call on Sishat. I would definitely call on Tehuti. And maybe even the divine ancestor Imhotep for health problems. And there could be many more that you might call as well, depending on what works for you. For relationships, perhaps I would call on Het Heru. Perhaps I would call on Asar. Perhaps I would call on Ast, who some call Osset. All of those are Neteru, are energies that would be helpful in that kind of work. And you should do some altar work around it. What is the Kemetic moon for word for moon? Iya. Iya is the moon, is the sometimes pronounced Aa. Is the word for moon. I thought we were supposed to see them as representation of principles they stand for. Yes, that is the way that I would look at the Neteru. Abutsashat, Shrine of Sekhmet says Santa Claus is real, a real character in a story or a myth. You should know that there was literally someone who was Saint Nick, but all of the things that we describe whenever our calendar turns towards December, the end of December particularly, all the things that are described around Saint Nick are not Saint Nick. So there's also some challenge there, because sometimes there are historical people that have legendary stories, and you have to ask, is that person real, or is the person you're talking about mythos? These are all things that are kind of complex as well. Jesus the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus is real, a real character in a story or a myth. I don't know if the Tooth Fairy was literally a person that we ascribe myth to. And some people will be angry with me, but I want to be very clear. When it comes to the story of Jesus or Yeshua, I think that we have an excellent argument that Yeshua was not, as described in that group of books that we call the Bible today, was not a literal historical person. Does that mean that the narrative of Jesus is irrelevant? No. In fact, perhaps is even more relevant, because the story of Yeshua is one that we're all supposed to live through if you are a follower of Christianity. And so that is important. Siba Orikoku Obalafia, Anken Ma'at, one of our full members. Anken Ma'at. There's a lot that's been said. Let's move forward, because there's no way for me to try to address it all. But because I have not provided a forum to do that, I try to answer some of them here. So I hope that you are going to allow me to do Hesi as we talk about the ancestors. I'm not going to do a moment specifically focused on Hesi in today's Kemetic Ascension, because I intend to do some Hesi as we move forward and talk about the topic that we are meant to cover today. And that is ancestor veneration. Ancestor veneration. I want you to take a look at, well, let me give you some background on this topic first. How about we do that? I want us to recognize that in the Kemetic tradition, we have long focused on connecting with those who have left the physical plane, connecting with those who have, as we might say, most simply died. And in doing that, we should recognize that it is of critical importance for us to focus on the divine, to focus on people who are now ancestors. And this is of critical importance. Our Kemetic ancestors, those people who lived during the time that Kemet was a powerful nation focused on the divine, made altars to the divine, gave um, gave Hesi to the divine, gave offerings to the divine for thousands of years, longer than any other tradition that we have of note in the physical world. Longer than Christianity, longer than Judaism, longer than any of those traditions, our Kemetic ancestors who lived on the continent of Africa, in that nation that we know today as Kemet, that has been misnomered as Egypt. You should know that during that time, they focused on the ancestors. In fact, you are seeing here someone who has made their transition. They are actually in their coffin, in their neb ankh. That's what we would have called it. It's one of the names for that vessel that a body would be placed in after it was prepared, after mummification. After this moment, they'd be placed in their neb ankh. There would have been ceremonially and actually ladies crying for him. These were, and this is, in this instance, it's a male, but these ladies are meant to represent Ast and her sister in Bethet, who the Greeks called Isis and Nephthys. So there were usually two, at least two, that were mourning them. Why? Because the deceased is then meant to represent Asar. And then you see priests doing the actual ceremony of putting this person into the tomb. Are you seeing that? You're seeing that they're doing purification. Notice that one priest has a vessel there that's meant to be pouring. You're seeing that they're actually also using the setep, the actual item that is meant for the ceremony for the opening of the mouth, that allows the deceased to continue to act as a living being, that allows the deceased to open their mouth. You'll see these two tools here, and you're going to see behind here that this priest, this is one of the funerary priests. You'll notice that he's wearing actually a leopard cloth. That means that he is a Sem priest. He is likely the priest that is leading this, and he is burning incense to the deceased. That's what you're seeing here. He has incense in this holder here. And they have an altar to the deceased that they are pouring water on. That's what you're seeing here. An altar which has foods on it. Can you see that? So the idea of creating an ancestral altar is something that we see in time immemorial, in ancient African spirituality and in ancient Kemetic spirituality. The idea of the altar to someone that has made their transition, the oldest descriptions you will see come from Kemet. The oldest descriptions of an ancestral altar and the ceremony towards the deceased, the oldest ones come from Kemet. This is important. And I would like to argue with you, or make the argument for you, beloved, Kemeti, that it is time for us to be up in our ancestral altars even more than we would normally be. Why? Because we are in a moment where many in this nation would like to erase our ancestors. You might have noticed reports saying that the federal government under Donald Trump had removed web pages to Harriet Tubman, had removed web pages to Jackie Robinson, and others are saying that they'd like to erase particularly those ancestors who struggled against enslavement and who struggled against other forms of subjugation and tyranny. They are trying to erase them. I should say this very clearly. They are erasing them. And in our tradition, the way that an ancestor continues to live is if we continue to say their names, is if we continue to feed them. Well, we are in a moment where there is an organized group of people who are leading the nation who are trying to ensure that these ancestors will never be spoken of again. I would argue that it is more important today for us to focus on those ancestors whose names, whose legacies, whose commitment are being erased than ever before. If we allow this to happen, we will forget them. And as we forget these audacious Africans who fought under the most challenging of circumstances and who won, we very rarely talk about them as people who successfully did anything. They were the bravest people with the fewest resources, and they beat the most powerful global system in the world. If we don't call on them, if we don't allow their names to continue to be spoken, they cannot intervene on our behalf. That's almost like you going to play basketball and you leave your best player on the bench. That's like you going to play baseball and your cleanup hitter stays in the dugout. That's like you fighting inequity, fighting racism, fighting subjugation, and you leaving those people who were most victorious out of the picture. Maybe the reason why we catching so much hell is because we're not calling on the names of those ancestors who fought against hell and all of its demons. Maybe that's why we're catching the hell that we are in. We must continue to call on them. It is of critical importance. And I want us to think about, I'm a New Yorker, right? I was born in New York City. I live in New York City. The Shrine of Ma'at is based in New York City. I want us to think about the enslaved history of New York City. We are hearing people say that enslavement wasn't that bad, that if we thought about it in its historical context, we wouldn't feel bad about it. We wouldn't be asking for reparations for it. In fact, we would say, everybody was enslaved. Let's move on. While the descendants of those who held our ancestors in chains, while the descendants of those who raped our mothers and our fathers, while the descendants of those who built the world's most powerful nation on the backs of our ancestors continue to profit from their theft. That's why they want you to forget about them. Imagine a homeless person literally sleeping in the cold on the sidewalk, completely destitute, without a meal, without a place to rest their head. And you happen upon them and you say, wait a minute, who are you? Did you know you have been kicked away from, the police keep moving you from this sidewalk for a reason. Because you have been camping out in front of that mansion, and those wealthy, powerful people don't want to look out their window and see you. They don't want to walk out their home and smell you because you have not been able to take care of yourself, bathe yourself, wash yourself. You are sitting here in the funk of ages. They don't want to deal with your funk. They don't want to look at your dirty, destitute self. So the police have been called umpteen times to remove you. But you know what? You may not know this, but that mansion was owned, was built by your grandfather and grandmother. And the real reason why they're moving you is because they hope you don't remember who the hell you are and come back to take what is rightfully yours. That's what this is truly about. Those people who have benefited from the greatest crime in human history are trying to say to you, it wasn't a big deal. Let's move on. That's what's happening here. And as long as you don't know, you're going to still be destitute on the sidewalk while they enjoy your opulent mansion. That's what's happening here. I want you to understand that during enslavement, if you looked at all of those things that wealthy white people owned, their farms, maybe they had built railroads, maybe they had factories that smelted iron or produced some other item that was extremely valuable in the moment. Do you know that the most wealth producing item that existed was you? That the enslaved African was the greatest commodity that one could own. That the first millionaire in the United States of record was an enslavement owner. Do you know that if you went to New Jersey during the time that it was created as a colony, they would actually give you acres of land? And if you had enslaved people, they would give you more per enslaved person? Did you know that? I want you to understand that the wealth of this nation was built on the backs of Black people. Let's talk a bit about the enslavement history of New York. I promise I won't tarry on this item too long, but I want you to understand that New York is one of the wealthiest areas, one of the wealthiest states, and within it is one of the wealthiest cities in the United States, and it was built on the backs of people of African descent. That you could draw a straight line from those people who profited to those people in institutions that are now profiting. Well, let's talk briefly about this topic. First of all, if you look at this picture, you should know that this picture was drawn by Howard Pyle in 1917, and it was meant to represent the first auction of enslaved people in New Amsterdam. You may not know this, but before Europeans decided to call this area New York, it was called New Amsterdam because the Dutch were the first Europeans to settle in this area. In fact, so many of the names that we're familiar with are actually Dutch words. Brooklyn is a Dutch word. Did you know that? In fact, the last Dutch governor was a man named Peter Stuyvesant. You're going to see the name Stuyvesant everywhere, all over New York City. Was he a slave owner? Of course he was. Most of the names that we see are names of people who had owned enslaved people, or many of the other names are people who didn't own enslaved people but benefited from it. I am now in Queens, and I know I grew up in Queens and was so familiar with this boulevard called Francis Lewis Boulevard. How many of you have heard of Francis Lewis Boulevard? It's a large and long boulevard in the borough of Queens. Well, why is this area, this very prominent street, named after him? Well, he was one of the people who actually signed the Declaration of Independence. Wow. And they'll even tell you, well, guess what? He didn't own any enslaved people. That is true. Francis Lewis did not own enslaved people as far as we know, but he traded them. But he traded them. So when people say, did you know that only 2% of all white people owned enslaved people? That's what that foolish racist from The Biggest Loser, that exercise person, guru from The Biggest Loser, that show that has now been roundly described as inappropriate and unhealthy. Jillian Michaels was recently, I believe this was late last week, when she was on Abby Phillips Tonight on CNN, she said, did you know that only 2% of white people own slaves? First of all, that's not true. The figure is not true. Second of all, you should know that that doesn't even make any sense. Enslavement is a system. And many, many, many Europeans benefited from it. Francis Lewis, as far as we can tell, didn't own enslaved people, but he benefited from the system. He traded enslaved people. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we unearthed in another document that says that he did. So many of the people, the names of these places that we're familiar with, Nostrand or Nostrand, Fulton, all of these names are named after people who owned our ancestors. And if they are present in areas that actually have large African-American, Afro-Caribbean populations, we tend to actually get to a point where we revere these names. Because they in my hood. Yeah, they're in your hood, but there are people who owned you. That's where we are. That's where we are. So, when the Dutch came in 1826, you should know that the first European to to actually come and try to map the area that we would call the East Coast and certainly New York is a person known as Henry Hudson, and also another person named Da Verrazano. Those people mapped this area. In fact, you'll know there's a large bridge between New York and between Brooklyn and Staten Island, known as the Verrazano Bridge. It's named after that explorer. And you'll also notice that as we look at the river that is in New York, it's the Hudson River, named after these Europeans. And I want you to recognize that when the Dutch first came here and settled the area for Europeans in 1626, they actually brought enslaved people with them. Now, I want to say something to you that you may not know. Instead of just thinking this as an amorphous group of Africans, I want you to know that we know some of their names. And if you don't pour libation to them today, what the hell are you doing? I'm going to give you 5 of the names. I just recently did a Black New York tour. I guess this is now 3 weeks ago, a Black New York City tour. And we poured libation for these names. They are Paul D'Angola, Simon Congo, Louis Guinea, Jan Guinea, Acento Angola. And there were 6 other people whose names we don't have. Those were the first people of African descent that were brought to New York, and we know their names. By the way, I think it's also interesting that at that time the Dutch were using the country that they were taken from as their last name, not an enslaver's last name, but the country they were taken from. Hence, we see Angola, Congo, Guinea. And I think we also should recognize that Paul de Angola and several other of those men, actually, the Dutch had a system that they called half-free black, half-free Negro. So that after working for a while, you could be considered half-free. Now, you know the hypocrisy of the Tom Who. What the hell is a half-free person? Hypocrisy. But I do want you to recognize that this status allowed them to actually own land while they were still forced to work on it. And Paul de Angola ended up being a landowner in Manhattan. Did you know that? All of the land that these Africans then began to own are in that area that we now call Washington Square Park. Did you know that? That same popular park that is around the area where New York University is. In fact, if you are a person as old as I, you probably grew up watching the Cosby Show. Very often they would show that area, because I want to say that one of the students, I think it was Theo, who actually is an Ancestor now. The actor that played Theo actually went to school at NYU. And so I want you to recognize that that area was routinely in the B shots for the Cosby Show. And so we should recognize that person, Malcolm Jamal Warner, actually went to the place to NYU. And whenever they showed it, you should recognize this is where Africans first owned land in New York City. Well, the first auction of enslaved people actually occurred in 1655. That is what this painting is meant to represent. And that was in New Amsterdam. You should understand that much later, the British would take control of New Amsterdam, and they no longer wanted to be named New Amsterdam. They decided it would be called, for the Duke of York, they would call it New York. That's how the name changed. And so that is how New Amsterdam becomes New York. By the way, Harlem, you know, Harlem is home to me. I love Harlem. Harlem was New Harlem, but the people who lived there decided, they lobbied the British and said they did not want to change the name. So in an agreement, they decided they would no longer call it New, and they'd remove the second A. It had two A's, Harlem. So then Harlem with two A's, New Harlem with two A's, became Harlem. It is a Dutch word. And there is still a city named Harlem in the Netherlands today. Well, you should know that New York City, in fact, New York State, had so many enslaved people working mostly in factories and as the help in wealthy homes. You should know that New York State and New York City often had more enslaved people than many southern states that were working in a more agrarian manner. In fact, during the Civil War, the mayor at the time of New York City suggested that maybe New York City itself should secede with the Confederacy. Did you know that? Did you know that? The second highest proportion of any city in the colonies, proportion of enslaved people, was in New York City. New York City had the second highest proportion per capita of enslaved people. The only city that had more enslaved people per capita was Charleston, South Carolina. More than 42% of New York City households had enslaved African people by 1703. And you should know that there were two major enslaved African revolts that occurred here. The New York Slave Revolt of 1712, which was well planned, and 9 Europeans, 9 Tom who were killed during the rebellion. And there was also the New York Conspiracy of 1741. I'd love to talk more about these now, but it's not time to do that. You should know that in the New York conspiracy of 1741, enslaved Africans and poor whites were burning down buildings secretly. Fascinating. Fascinating what happened during these events. When we finally see that the United States, the colonies of the Americas, are then going to fight to become an independent nation, we know this as the American Revolutionary War. The British troops actually held New York City for virtually the entire time that the war was happening. You know, the war ends in 1783, I believe, is the year that the war ends. With the Treaty of Paris, I believe, is when it ends. And you should know that during that time, the British owned New York. They had control of New York, and they had troops stationed here. And in fact, the British had decided that one of the ways they would try to fight the colonists, these American colonists, is that they would tell enslaved Africans if they fought with them, they would get their freedom. And it first starts with a document called Dunmore's, I want to show it to you really quickly, Dunmore's Proclamation. And in fact, based on Dunmore's population, enslaved Africans who fought with the British, some of them in what were called the Ethiopian Regiment, would wear this. Look at that. It literally says liberty to slaves. As they fought, they would have worn this smock. And you could imagine that it would have really made those enslavers who were the wealthy colonists in the United States really angry. Very, very angry. So in New York State, there was another proclamation that was based on Lord Dunmore's proclamation called the Philipsburg Proclamation. And it did the same thing. It promised freedom to enslaved people. And because New York City was held by the British, many enslaved Africans throughout what were the colonies escaped to New York City because they wanted to be able to work with the British. It's very fascinating. When the British lose the war, they actually take about 3,000 formerly enslaved African people with them. Did you know that? That is what the Book of Negroes is. The Book of Negroes was the book that the British created to describe the formerly enslaved that left New York with them. Many of them actually ended up being repatriated in Nova Scotia, and then eventually some of them even went to Sierra Leone. And so I want you to understand that these places, yes, Sierra Leone is where they went, because Liberia is the one that the United States created. Anyway, understand that these enslaved Africans many of them did get their freedom, and they're called the Black Loyalists. I am currently writing a paper on them, and it's a fascinating story that most of us are not familiar with. Africans were not really thinking, these enslaved people were not thinking, hey, I love the colonists, I'm going to work with them. They were saying, look, whoever's going to free me is who I'm going to be loyal to. And so many Africans fought with the British. After the American Revolution, the New York Manumission Society, an abolitionist organization, was founded in New York in 1785, and they fought for abolition and to aid free Black people who lived in New York. And by 1799, New York State passed a law for gradual abolition, which said that if you were born after that, you would be freed if you were a man at the age of 28, and freed if you were a woman at the age of 25. And then there was another law passed in 1817 that said all enslaved people in New York would no longer be enslaved by July 4th, 1827. And it was a massive celebration in New York when that happened. By the way, we should be preparing New Yorkers, Black New Yorkers, for a celebration, I think, in 2027 to celebrate the freedom of our New York ancestors. This to me is really, really important, and we should remember that. That's not what I wanted to show you. Anyway, let's do this so that we can move a bit more quickly. Just to drive down the idea that New York really was a bastion for enslavement. I want you to look at this. Can you see this? This is an image that is meant to represent New Amsterdam. Can you see it here? Novum Amsterdam is meant to represent New York under the Dutch. And as you go down, I want you to notice on this boat here, can you see it here? This is meant to be an enslaved African hung by a hook. I wish I could zoom further in so you could see it. Did you know that? Yes, Sister Ayana, Dr. Umar doesn't know what the Book of Negroes is. I've heard him say it too. He thinks it's an insult. I'm gonna put you in the Book of Negroes. That's he keeps saying that, and he doesn't know what it is. But I want you to understand that this was an extremely painful form of torture, and we know that it is so critical that even in an image describing New Amsterdam, we see an enslaved African being tortured. Imagine that. This is the history of enslavement in this city, in this state. So I believe that it is of critical importance for us to begin to communicate with them, to begin to pour libation to them, to begin to give them honor and offering as these Africans fought for us to be free. In fact, there's an excellent, there are a bunch of excellent books that you could read about enslaved Africans in New York. I think that if you're a New Yorker like myself, you better read it. Oh boy. Really quickly, let me just show you this. By the way, here is the Book of Negroes. This is the book known as the Book of Negroes. You should read it, okay? And it actually has a long teacher's guide that describes who these people are, who they were, and why it is so important for us to recognize what occurred. There are several other books that deal with enslavement in this area, and I argue we should all be familiar with them. Why? Because many of us have been given the impression that in the North, that enslavement wasn't a thing, that it was really something that occurred in the South. That is not true. And we should continue to push back against that because Europeans are trying to exculpate themselves in this, the most powerful city in the United States. Here's another really great book. I'm going to show you this very quickly. Underground Railroad in New York and New Jersey by William Switala. This is how I educate myself on these topics so that I'm able to talk about them and teach this topic. Here's one, I'll show you one more and then that's the end. African or American, Black Identity and Political Activism in New York City, 1784 to 1861. This is by Leslie Alexander, a professor at Rutgers. We went to Cornell together. She's a good friend. This is an excellent book. This is an excellent book, and you must, if you're interested in this topic, get a copy of it. So, how would our ancestors celebrate these people? How do we celebrate these people, particularly our ancestors, as their legacy is being erased right before our eyes? How do we do this? I think that if we look at the standard that we see in the oldest written spiritual tradition in ancient Africa, ancient Kemet, it will give us a sense of how we should begin to celebrate these people who are unknown at this point. And I'm going to tell you that I think I should show you this now. I just recently, earlier this week, I was moved by thinking about the Africans who were enslaved in this area. And I went to a place where this person was not enslaved, at least not as far as we know, but we know that this is an old burial ground that occurred right after enslavement. And recently in New York, there was construction being done. This is in Queens. I'm not even talking about the African burial ground in Manhattan that I spend a lot of time at. In Queens, they were digging and they found a woman, a body of a woman, and they assumed that this was a murder case until they began to realize this person actually was buried here in the 1800s in New York, and her body was very well preserved. I'm going to tell you, we actually also have figured out her name. Take a brief image of this documentary from PBS called Woman in the Iron Coffin. I'm only going to play a few moments of it. Please, I hope I'm not going to lose you. I want you to look at it. And then what we'll do is we will then, I'll then create an altar to my ancestors that hopefully I hope will inspire you to create one to your ancestors. Take a quick look.
Queens, New York. Construction workers discover the body of a young woman. At first, it appears to be a homicide. But something about the scene doesn't quite add up.
My colleague was finishing off sweeping away the last residue of the soil. That's when he discovered something kind of shocking.
Now, forensic archaeologist Scott Warnash wants to piece together this historical puzzle. With the help of a close-knit New York community,
we can identify with her because she does look like us. And so it does make it personal.
Look at these sisters sitting here looking at an image of
that circle.
Leading scientific experts,
lots of different chemicals that are captured in her teeth that told us a little bit more about how she lived.
And cutting-edge technology.
This is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this before.
We open the door to a neglected history.
It was like a digital puzzle that we're piecing together.
It's really important that we create this rich, diverse tapestry of African-American life in the 19th century.
To reveal the mystery behind the woman in the iron coffin.
This area right here is North Queens, Corona, Elmhurst border.
Middle class, not a bad area.
It's a mixed population here. A lot of local businesses, not really a bad place in terms of crime. Crime can
He's a
happen
police
anywhere.
officer, so they talk
In my
about
career, I've seen
areas as
over 1,000
bad
homicides.
or less
You
bad.
get a little bit numb to it, but it doesn't get easier.
It's about crime.
To be called out for a
And
DOA in this
I'm gonna
area
give them a break
is
here for a
not
minute.
really that
though that
uncommon, but
description is offensive.
it's not a frequent event in this area.
911 emergency.
On October 4th, 2011, construction workers at a site in Queens made a grim discovery.
This is where I poured libation.
We received a call at
late
crime
at
scene
night.
at about 9:15 in the evening.
It was a DOA, and it was deemed that they discovered under suspicious circumstances. The workers at the construction site were working with the heavy equipment, and they hit something which they believed was a pipe, and they saw an individual in it, and that's when they decided to call the police.
Detectives Warren Davis and Robert Sands were two of the first responders.
What we had when we came to the site, we found it was all plywooded up. It was dark, there was no lighting, and in the background, what we had was a field that we could see it barely with our flashlights. But we knew down in the pit areas where this backhoe unearthed this individual.
But what at first seemed like a recent homicide soon became something much stranger.
There was some metal that was very intriguing to see.
What they did see over there obviously was very unusual.
You see the
It was
hands there and
surprising
the feet?
to see how well preserved the remains were.
Who did these remains belong to?
My name is Scott Warnash. I'm a forensic archaeologist. I spent a lot of my early career in archaeology working on traditional archaeological sites, historical and prehistoric, and I gravitated towards excavating skeletons and cemeteries or burial grounds. I was always interested in forensics, although I was very squeamish and I didn't think I'd be able to get through the proper coursework to actually get that formal degree. I originally began working at the medical examiner's office at the World Trade Center, handling the remains, doing the case file work, and releasing the remains to the family members. Recovering potentially human remains and identifying the victims puts my usual work at a much higher level of satisfaction than typical archaeological projects. October 5th, 2011, it started off like a normal day, although a normal day at the medical examiner's office is probably a bit different than everybody else's. When we got to work, we were told that we had to get a crew together for the forensic anthropology unit to respond to a potential crime scene in Queens. Apparently, a body was discovered in Elmhurst. So we arrived at the scene on Corona Avenue, walked into the site, and spoke to the detectives to get a little background on the situation. The team lines up as we approach the scene, and we're looking on the ground, looking for any type of evidence that may have been dug up from the machinery and spread around the site. It was then when I noticed this piece of rusty metal. It wouldn't have been anything to anybody else on the site. However, I had some idea of the significance of it. This told me that this wasn't an ordinary crime scene. This suggested that the person died over 150 years ago. As we were uncovering the body and exposing it, we quickly realized that we're dealing with an African-American woman. She seemed to have been buried in some sort of a white nightgown and high, thick knee socks. Forensic protocol suggests that you leave the most sensitive parts of the body covered until the last minute. That way they're protected from the sun or any other situations. My colleague Chris was finishing off sweeping away the last residue of the soil around the woman's chest and around her face. That's when he discovered something kind of shocking. And as he's sweeping away, we could see these lesions all over the top of her chest and on her forehead. It looked a lot like smallpox. So the situation went from a potential crime scene to an archaeological discovery to a potential biohazard within like an hour.
I want you to go and look at this documentary. It is amazing. It is known as The Woman in the Iron Coffin. You'll see the entire hour-long documentary, a little bit less than an hour, is on YouTube for you to watch. It was a PBS special in their series known as Secrets of the Dead. I know when I saw it, I was absolutely amazed at how amazing this was. And I'm going to just cut to the chase and let you know that this person, her name, we believe is now, it's believed that she was buried in 1851, would have been after enslavement in New York ended. But she clearly would have known people who were enslaved in New York. It's part of that period. Enslavement in New York ends in total in 1827. She would have known people, perhaps even her family members or parents, grandparents who had been enslaved. This is part of the history of people who are being erased. When you pour your libation, pour also to the name of Martha Peterson. That is who this woman is. Martha Peterson. And there was a cemetery there run by a Black church that is now, there are activists who are fighting over what will happen to the old cemetery. We must be involved in the preservation of our ancestors. Without preserving our ancestors, how can we believe that we can meet their challenge? How can we believe that we will ever be able to be a self-sufficient, self-reliant, powerful people once more. We must remember to speak to these ancestors. It is of critical importance. And of course, as I've said to you, recognize that this idea of speaking to the ancestors is a very old one. In ancient Kemet, you're going to see that image on the left is from a tomb of a very prominent, he's likely a prominent noble in the Old Kingdom. Who knows what the name of that tomb is on the left? What is it known as? Let's see if any of you remember. I've shown it to you before. But as you look at it, you're going to notice that there is what is known as a Ka statue, a life-size statue that is meant to represent this new ancestor. And on the bottom, under it, you're going to see these stairs. Now, much of it has been damaged, but at the top of the stairs, you're going to see a glyph. This is literally a glyph here. This is the glyph for Hotep or Hetep. It's not only meant to mean peace, but it actually also means offering. In fact, it's one of the names of an ancestral altar. It could be called a Hetep. Another name that's very common is Sa'ut. These are names for ancestral altars in the Kemetic tradition. So I want you to recognize that you are seeing the place where someone would have given an actual offering to this ancestor. And as you see, these are stairs that ascend and descend. Notice he's facing outward. This means that as you provide offering to him, he shall be able to come and go. He shall be able to intervene. He shall be able to be involved in the affairs of those who are here to remember him. And in fact, as we read from the Reyu Pertem Hiru and Ger, you're going to notice in this prayer, this is what I call the ancestor transition prayer. It is in the Reyu Pertem Hiru and Ger. You're going to see Ja'ak, Zu Empet, Us Emta, Macheru, Em Neterhert, Zet Ert Jejetu, Emba Ankh, Henetu, Heneti, Abtu, Mbenu, Akper An, Senar Tu, Cherseba, Nebu en Juat, Au Jatatu Na, Tau Em, Pacheb, Hetepu en Anu, Sech Men Em, Zeket Arui, Perbeti, Amef, En Ka en Asar, An Ani. So if you're looking at this version of the Reyu Pertem Hiru and Ger, the one that is translated by, I see Ben Benny is asking the page number. I'm going to give it to you right here. As you actually read it, you're going to see this is on pages 10 and 11. It comes from plates 2 on the Papyrus of Ani. And you should know that this is the translation. Give thou splendor in heaven, might on earth, triumph in the Neterhert, sailing down to Jejetu as a living soul, sailing up to Abtu as a Benu, as a phoenix, going in and coming out without being repulsed at the gateways of the Duat. May there be given to me loaves of bread in the house of coolness, offerings of Anu, a field enduring in Serket Arui, and wheat and barley in it, to the Ka of Asar, the scribe Ani. So you notice that I said that when you make your transition, you actually are also you become a Sar. Here, it's right here. We see Ani as being described as a Sar. So for those of you who are saying, I thought that the Kemetic people believed that the gods were real. Yes, they were real, just not literal. This is the important point that I think people need to understand. Everyone, a justified soul, one who is macheru, true voice, macheru, true voice, becomes a Sar. And so we are seeing here, listen to this particular portion. It says that we give offerings so they can go in and come out without being repulsed to the entry of the Duat. What does that mean? It means that as we give offerings to our ancestors, they can return to the land of living and intervene in our struggles. Would you not want to have Harriet Tubman on your back fighting for you? Would you not want to have Nat Turner holding the cutlass against your enemies? You must be at the point where you are making libation and saying Hesi to your ancestors. In this instance, I'm not singing it or chanting it. I would call this Hekau, words of power to your ancestors. And our Kemetic ancestors are telling us in one of their most important texts that the ancestor who makes their transition can go to the land of the ancestors and return and go back and go. And we are making a prayer saying, please, once they come into our land, into the land of the living, we're asking that they not be denied entry into the land of the afterlife. They can come back and forth. That is why this individual, by the way, none of you told me his name. His name is Mereruka. Mereruka. That is why Mereruka, I'm going to give it to you here. That is why we see him in his Ka pose there. That's what we're seeing. Mereruka is actually in this section of his tomb. This is the place where one would give offerings to him so that his soul could continue to live into immortality. And by the way, the item on the left, on the right, is usually called, by Western scholars, they will call this a false door. I think that term doesn't meet the moment. It does not describe what is happening here. That is a spirit door. It's a door in the chapel area of a tomb that allows one to go in and come out. They call it a false door because you can't open it. They're like, it looks like a door, but you can't go in and out. It's not for you, person on the physical plane. It is for the ancestor to come in and out. Would you not want your grandmama to intervene on your behalf? Those people who love you, who care for you. Would you not want them to get in the fight on a daily basis? I know that there's some practitioners of the Abrahamic traditions today that think this is scary. Oh my goodness, don't talk to the dead. What? Do you know, I have a neighbor, my mother has a neighbor who was very close to my family for literally 50 years. And when my father died in this building, when he made his transition in 2020, May 30th of 2020 to be exact, she stopped coming to the house because she was afraid that because he died there, that there would be something bad to occur. And when I saw her, I said to her, well, wait a minute. My father always spoke so highly of you. Yes, we were close friends. I said, so what would happen if you saw him? Don't you think that he would try to have your back? Don't you think he would want to give you love? Don't you think that he would actually be your greatest advocate in the world of the Neteru, I didn't say Neteru, and the world of the ancestors? She said, yes, I guess I would. Why are you running away from the place where he made his transition? We must recognize that the most powerful entities in our struggles must be those who fought the good fight, must be those who were successful in this battle that we have. And those are the ancestors. So today, as we close, I want to make a very basic ancestral altar. You're going to see that I have this wooden table. It's an old wooden table that was part of and the folks who have made their transition. A woman that I cared about very dearly gave it to me. She's an ancestor now as well. I purify it, I clean it. Sometimes I wipe it with a little bit of Florida water. But if you don't have Florida water, which is just simply water that has been flowers have been desiccated in, and there's a little bit of alcohol in it. If you don't have that, just clean it well, okay? Your intention will help with its purification. So I have this. Then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to just take this tapestry. I love this tapestry. Some of you may see it behind me sometimes. I use it for all sorts of things. It's a Kemetic tapestry. I love it dearly. I'm going to cover the table with it. This is the most simple altar I can make very quickly to reach the ancestors. It's after 2, so I'm moving quickly. But take a look. I'm going to move this down so you can see it. Using one camera here. Can you see that? I think you can. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing now so that you're able to see the table a bit more clearly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a few important items on it. Here, I'm going to begin by putting the images of some of those ancestors on it. In fact, for the sake of time and also the sake of power, I'm going to choose some very specific ancestors. I'm going to actually choose as the most vaunted ancestor on this ancestral table. I'm going to place an image of my father. I told you he just made his transition a little more than 5 years ago. I'm going to place him on that altar. And I know very well that if there was any being that would still want to intervene in my life, it would be my father. Just knowing who he is, knowing how important I was to him, I would do that. And I'm also going to place some life on the altar. I'm going to also place some life on the altar. I'm going to place some of his implements on the altar. My father was an upholsterer. He made furniture for many, many years. That's how he helped our family to survive. I'm going to place that on the altar. Here's an image of my father, Winfred Levy Jacobs. I think on this altar, I'm also going to put a picture of my great aunt who loved him so dearly. That's Aunt Hazel. And I'm going to place my maternal grandfather on here too. These are just some of the pictures I'm using. This is Verity Daly. He was a historian, as I am a historian, wrote several books on the history of Guyana. One of the most revolutionary people I knew in my life. I'm going to place, I'm doing this quickly, I'm going to place some life on here. Normally, I would also place food for the ancestors. I would feed them carefully. Here goes a vessel that I'm going to use. This green vessel I love dearly. My mother was going to discard it, and when I saw it, I said, no, I must keep it. The green reminds me of the energy of Asar, and in addition to that, it is something that was owned by my great aunt, Aunt Hazel. I'm going to place some tea lights in here. Now listen, I like to place 14 tea lights for the pieces of Asar being reassembled. I'm not going to do 14. I'm just going to do 3 here right now, just for the sake of this presentation. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to place some water, purified water. Normally, I also use water from the Hopi River on this, but I'm not going to do that today. And along with this, because they are the ancestors who lived a life divine, who lived, while they may never have spoken the word Ma'at, they lived in divine balance. I'm going to place this statue of Ma'at, which I had carved in Ghana, West Africa. Can you see Ma'at here? I actually love this statue. It was carved for me in Ghana, West Africa. It actually sits atop a staff. And then as I pray, I'm going to light the candles and I'm going to do the Asar Hesi. Iau, 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 Asar Neferu. Iau, 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 Asar Neferu. Iau, 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 Asar Neferu. Di Isa Neteru. Asar, 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 ah, Asar, 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 ah, Asar, 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 ah, Asar, 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 ah. I stand here and I ask you, ancestors, to stand with me in times of trouble. I ask you, ancestors, to continue to give me divine wisdom and allow me to live in divine balance. I ask you, O ancestors, to be present in my life and to continue to show me the way. And I ask that all of the things that I do, all of the things that I make, all of the things that I hew are things that are done in divine order. I give you this, Winfred, your hammer. I know that this is an implement that you would have had in your hand as you did your work. And in fact, one of the things that you created was me. I will not forget you. I will not betray you. And I will seek to finish your unfinished works, to glorify your finished works, and to do new work on the basis of your legacy. Dad, I'm speaking to you. Show me your face. It's been some time since I've seen you. You usually come and speak to me. I have not seen you in weeks. I miss you, Father. I ask for you to remain an active part of my life. I thank you for your commitment, your legacy, all of the things that you did so that I can draw breath. I speak to you, grandfather. Assist me with my writing and my study, O historian. Help me do the work that I know that you have asked me to do. I speak to you, great Aunt Hazel. I know that you were tough, a spitfire, and you had excellence in business. I ask you to make me a good steward of my resources as I try to move forward and do new things in your name. I speak to you, ancestors known and unknown, named and unnamed. I ask you to remain with us. We will not betray you. We will not forget you. We will continue to say your names, and we will continue to honor your legacy. Dwa'u, Dwa'u, Dwa'u. Family, I know I've had you here really late today. I want you to get up in your altars. Make sure that you're speaking to your ancestors, those that are in your direct lineage and those that are not in your lineage directly. Make sure that you're doing the work. Make sure you're making the ancestors proud. I want you to remember that as we think about these divine individuals who have done so much to allow us to draw breath, that this is not just something academic. Very often as a historian, I give you the history, but I want you to recognize that you should also be doing the practice. That our tradition is one that is alive, that our tradition is one that is vibrant. And I want to speak to your ancestors for a moment. Guide them. Help them do what they must do. I know you know we catching hell. And I know you know that as you caught hell, ancestors, you were victorious. Guide our community. I say Tuan Ter, Twaluin Ter. Thank you to the divine. With that, the divine force in me greets the divine force in you. Please continue to do the work that you must do. Get up in your altars. Don't allow anyone to erase our ancestors. Do what you must do to ensure that they are remembered and that they continue to live. With that, I say, Shemin Ma'at, go forth in divine balance. I will see you all really, really soon.